Hope everybody is doing well this morning. Welcome to our second quarter webinar, Residential New Construction with an Introduction to Green Homes. A couple of housekeeping items. My name is Sally Carruthers. I am the CEO and Chief Valuation Officer here at Trunion. I think we have some appraisers on the line and we have some clients, maybe some members of the general public. I think we put it out on social media. Every one of you is on mute. So because of the number of people on this webinar, we could not kind of do any kind of interaction during the webinar. And so you are on mute. However, at the end, you will see my contact information. And if you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. We will be sending out a link to this presentation after the presentation, and we will also put a recording on our website. So anybody in your offices that didn't manage to join the webinar can see it at any time. So you're very welcome to do that. The other thing I just want to say is that this is kind of a jam-packed webinar. There is a lot of information. So I'll try and move through fairly quickly. I apologize. I do have an accent, and when I talk quickly, you may not understand me. So feel free to go back and look at the slides, and I apologize in advance for that. But there isn't a lot of information on here. We are touching the surface. We are not getting into an incredible amount of detail. So what I would like to propose is that at some point, Trunion would like to actually sponsor a symposium on new construction with a particular emphasis on green homes. I think this is a fascinating subject that lots of people want to be more informed of. So we will actually be trying to get with some of our credit union partners, our appraiser partners, builders and realtors, and get everybody around the same table and have perhaps a day-long symposium where we really dig into this subject. So let's start off and talk a little about new construction. So the first thing to think about when we talk about appraising new homes or homes under construction is, particularly on the residential side and obviously on the commercial side, and there is really an emphasis on the residential side here, we have to produce market value. And so one of the things to consider is the relationship between cost and value. So I just wanted to quickly go over this definition of market value. And this definition is grounded in the value of exchange. Whereas when we talk about the cost to build a new home, it is a cost, the cost of construction. So somehow there has to be a merging of those two events when we come up with market value. And so the definite market value is on your forms. You understand what it is, the most probable price which a property should bring in a competitive market, and an arm's length transaction, essentially. It is that value of exchange. And in essence, when somebody builds a home, it's not always a value in exchange. Somebody will decide that they want to have a certain type of floor coverings or a cabinet, and sometimes it's a cost or a price. It's not necessarily an exchange. So we're going to look at a little bit that relationship between the two. So one thing is, when we say new construction appraisal, there's a whole dimension here. There are a lot of different things. From a lender standpoint, they look at new construction basically as perm construction. Somebody owns a property or a site, and then they're going to have a builder come in and build a home on it. But for us as appraisers, there are a whole bunch of assignments where we are looking at the value of new construction. So in essence, it's something that has a C1 rating, right? Nobody has actually lived in that property. It is a brand new house. So that could be, as I said, a proposed custom home on an owner site. It could be a proposed spec home on a developer-owned site. In other words, The prospective owner is buying the house, so new house, and the site. They don't own the site already. It may be a proposed custom home with a site purchase. They're buying both the site and the custom home. And also it could be an existing spec home, or perhaps an existing custom home, or the envelope of a home that they're going to have improved. And something we're seeing a lot more of is new homes built following a tear down of an existing property. So that's a whole nother concept that you have to think about. They're buying a site, but there's a house already there that has to be demolished. So we have to look at the cost of demolition and then getting the site ready for this new construction. So condo construction, and that's a whole different thing. You may have a custom condo where somebody is buying the actual framework of that condo, and then they're doing a build out within the condo. And then, of course, any kind of factory built home too, where we have a site that's ready for development and the home is being bought into or onto that property in one piece or in multiple pieces. So there are so many assignments that you are involved in day to day which have a C1 rating. So before you start on your appraisal, I have to kind of ask you, do you have everything you need? There's a lot more information that you need probably on a new construction appraisal than an existing home. But sometimes it's a little easier, right? You don't have to go out to a property and measure it and deal with that. So do you have all your information? Do you have public information on the site? Who owns the site? Very important to know. Is the site ready for development? That's another thought. Does it have the utilities on it already, or do we have to improve that site with well and septic, and that type of thing? So all that information, you have to get the public information. Detailed plans. So often, in the days when I was in the field and I might get an order to do what was supposedly a new construction property, I would ask for the plans and they'd say, well, stop off at the model home and get a brochure. Well, I'm afraid that isn't what we need. A brochure is not going to give enough information on what is being built under a hypothetical condition. So yes, we need to have more details on a detailed set of plans. Specifications and costs. How does this property look when it's built? What are the costs involved in building this property? And all those things are items that you need. Any change orders. So that's during the process. Somebody comes in and changes everything, or just changes something. They bump out a family room. They add another bedroom. They add additional windows, or whatever it is. There are change orders that you need to be aware of if you're appraising under a hypothetical condition based on what that property is going to look like. Any builder's contracts, if applicable. A sales contract, if applicable. And you need to have the right data sources. And your data sources may not be, or should probably not be, limited to the multiple listing service. You need to have builder contact information, because not every new home sold is going to sell through the multiple listing service. So make sure before you start that you have everything you need. It is important to understand and have knowledge on how to describe a new home, especially when you are appraising under a hypothetical condition. So you have to describe your hypothetical condition and any extraordinary assumptions. So ensure that you properly understand how to transfer that set of plans and specifications into a description of what the new property would look like, because it doesn't exist. Understand when you're doing a new construction property, it could be under different scenarios. You may have an existing new construction property that is C1 that nobody has lived in yet. It may be proposed, or it may be under construction. Understand that you are or not doing a property under a hypothetical condition. You may be still doing an as-is appraisal where you have a property under construction. So, for example, we've done appraisals where a builder goes out of business. They've half-built a property, and our credit union client has asked us to do an appraisal of the property as it stands right now. It may be 70% done or 80% done or 20% done. You can still put an as-is value on it. It doesn't have to be a subject to value. But understand that there is an impact, not just on the cost to complete that property, but any potential marketability issues with it. When you look at that set of plans, understand that there may be functional issues. Don't assume that all new construction has no functional problems. There can possibly be functional problems. So really look at that set of plans to ensure that there are no existing functional problems. Understand, I think everybody knows that you're doing this appraisal based on an effective date, and that effective date is usually the date that you inspect the site. It is not some date in the future. So you're basically saying if this new construction exists right now today, what is it worth? Going back to that functional issue, look at one of the functional things that we do see is an issue of superadequacy. People get carried away. They want to build a brand new home, they want a custom build, and they want all the bells and whistles. And sometimes they will create superadequacy, which is a functional issue, and relating to the conformity of that property to the neighborhood. Don't be afraid to say that maybe a property is superadequate for that area. And it's not unusual to happen. And it does happen when we get into talking about green homes. There is sometimes an issue where it necessarily or not necessarily doesn't conform to the market area. And that difference between the cost to construct and the market value of the property is really from that superadequacy or that functional issue. So valuing a site, probably one of the foundational things in doing new construction is to ensure that you value the site accurately. And I see probably many problems in new construction appraisals because appraisers do not accurately value that site. And they kind of back into the whole site value. But the site value is the foundation for your value. Even if you are looking at a value in exchange, and then also the cost approach, that site value is fundamental to that value. So ensure that you understand how to value that site ready for development. Make sure that you understand highest and best use. And, I think for a lot of residential appraisers, it's kind of a moot point, tick the box, and we know it's residential, that's it. But really look at those 4 tests for highest and best use. So, first of all, is it legally permissible? Is it zoned residential? Or what, beyond that, is it zoned residential and capable of supporting the residential use or legally supporting the residential use that is being put to? Does it have adequate size? Does it have adequate setbacks, et cetera, et cetera? So that legal aspect is really important. Following on that, the physical aspect of your highest and best use. Is it physically possible to put the property that is proposed on this site? So if you've got a property that 80% of it is sitting in the flood zone, can we still put this property on this improvement onto this site? What are we going to do with trees? Or what are we going to do with, a stream that's running through this property? The physical aspects of it. And then the next one is it actually economically, financially feasible to do it? So, what kind of changes do we have to make to that site in order to put this property on it? So, yes, we may be able to put a residence on there, and it may be physically possible, but what's the cost involved in putting that property on there? What kind of improvements do we have to do to that site? And then finally, is that the maximally productive use for that site? So highest and best use is incredibly important in new construction. we have to look at, as we value that site, what are the physical characteristics? What is, first of all, the size of the site? What is the shape of the site? Is it just a flag lot or a rectangular, or whatever it is, impacts the value of that site. And is it sitting on a lake or an ocean, or in the with a mountain view? All those physical characteristics impact the site value and therefore impact the value of that new construction. What are the utilities available, and what is the cost to bring in utilities if those utilities aren't available? And then, how do we actually value the site? Well, the best thing to do is a sales comparison approach. Are there available sites that we can find to support a value that we can adjust as necessary and come up with a site value? And if not, do we have the means to do another approach to value on the site valuation, extraction or allocation? And then in the case of an infill development, a tear down, what is the cost of demolition to bring that site ready for development? All these things have to be considered in the process of new construction. So we have a new construction appraisal. We know that we're going to do the cost approach. It would be extremely unusual if on a new construction you didn't do the cost approach. The big question is, do cost equal value? And then, as I've heard, and I think even when I took classes many, many years ago, I heard this thing that cost sets the upper end of value. So I think it's a good idea to go back to some of our basic economic principles. So the law of increasing returns, which is that larger and larger investments in structures and improvements will produce larger and larger net returns up to a certain point. So you can keep on making investments and you're going to get money back to a certain point, and that's where we come up with the law of diminishing returns or decreasing returns. So once that net return reaches its maximum, additional investment will produce a proportionate return on the investment. In other words, you contribute, get money back, you're going to get a return, you're going to get value from improving your property and building such a property. But at some point, the more you do to it, the less you're going to get back. And that somewhat is seen when we get into those green homes, but not always, and we're going to talk about that as we get on. So also the principle of substitution. So this is kind of where that idea that cost sets the upper end of value. And that is that a rational informed buyer will not pay more for a property than the cost of building an acceptable substitute, which has always been that argument that cost sets the upper limit, that people will, if they can buy brand new or buy a new substitute, they're going to go for that. And we see this, something that we see in new construction is this premium that people pay for new construction. And really, is it just to use that bathroom, be the first one to use the shower in there, or the first one to turn on the dishwasher? It's that premium for new construction. And then the principle of contribution. The value of a component is measured in terms of its contribution to the value of the whole. And the property components must be in proper proportion if optimum value is to be achieved. And again, this relates to our green homes. And that do the improvements that you make to a home that give it green, what they call a level of greenness, or make it a green home, can those be considered as adding value to the entire property? So some considerations in the cost approach. So depreciation in new construction. So the automatic thing is that there's no depreciation in new construction. We're going to build this perfect home that is accepted by the market. There's not going to be any functional issues, and obviously not going to be any physical issues because nobody's used it, and it's perfect. That is not always the case. There is definitely some depreciation potential in new construction, particularly on the functional side, with perhaps super adequacy or a poor design or high construction costs from, I don't know, a builder or probably a buyer gone crazy. So you go over that level of diminishing returns. So putting gold taps into the bathroom in a $400,000 neighborhood is probably not going to get you a particularly good return on your money. And then there can be external depreciation that perhaps not everybody is really wonderful about putting their brand new house in the right place. I think that where I've seen some examples of that is where somebody has a wonderful business going and it's in an industrial area in town and it's very successful and they want to live close to the business, so they put the house right in the middle of an industrial area. I don't know how they get the zoning changed, but I have seen that. And there can be areas of externalities. So new construction is not necessarily free of depreciation. So one question to ask, and I ask appraisers all the time, is your cost data really accurate? What you have, and many people, people use different things. They have Marshall and Swift, which is now CoreLogic. Often it's online. I think gone are the days where we used to have the books and the cost books, but other online data is available. But is it accurate? So look at what your sources are and look at the date of those sources to make sure that it is up to date. There's nothing more annoying than us looking at an appraisal report and seeing that your cost data is from 2012. Construction industry's changed a little bit since then. Does your cost data take into account hard and soft costs? So hard costs are actually the cost of construction, the cost to build it. The soft costs are the fees involved in that. Does it include both of them? Are you verifying your data? So when you do a new construction appraisal and you're looking at cost information on that subject property, are you verifying that that data really or the information you're getting from that matches up with your data? So verifying that cost data with local builders and people in your area to ensure you're cross-checking those sources. And with that, do you adequately understand the design of the new construction so you're matching it up appropriately with your cost data? Because if you've got a property that is a two-story contemporary building, the cost data for a mid-century ranch does not, mid-century ranch design does not match up. It's different. So make sure that you have, that you understand what is being built and that you use what's being built for your cost data. Sales comparison approach, of course, we're still going to do the sales comparison approach in our appraisal. So when we're looking at comparable sales, do those comparable sales meet the match of substitution? And I have to say, I see this all the time. I see people using existing homes that maybe 20, 30, 40 years old to compare to a new construction. And the argument that I get from the appraiser, well, there isn't any new construction in the area, which probably is not true. It's probably more that the appraiser is not willing to pick up the phone and call the builder for that information. Because I really would have an issue if there was no new construction. If you're building a property in an area that there is no other new construction, there would be a big question why. What is the demand for new construction if nobody's building new construction? And so I think that you have to be careful when you look at what your comparable sales, and you're truly using sales that are newer, if not new construction, to compare. Of course, we're going to talk a little about being the first in the project. You want to make sure that your comparable sales are not held captive. The price is not held captive by one developer or one builder. so that you're not getting a cross-section of what really should be in that market. Talk about that a little bit later on. Make sure you expand your data sources. You probably are not going to get all your information out of the multiple listing service. You're going to have to go a little bit further. You're going to need to have relationships with builders to get sales. Make sure that you're doing adequate research and analysis, and that you have correct verification on any sources that you have, whether it's builder sales, MLS, or anything else. Also, what have you got in your files? I'm sure that if you are doing new construction, you've done other new construction, you probably have adequate, some good data sitting right in your file. Remember also, I'm sure I don't have to tell you this, that you cannot create a sale by combining the cost to build with a land sale. And that's number 8 of your certification. So you can't kind of create a sale by the combination of that. And as I said, if there are no new sales, any sales in new homes, why? Is there a demand? That needs to be addressed probably in your neighborhood section. Beware of concessions. Builders love to give concessions. They love to give incentives for building a home. So be careful and make sure that you understand those concessions and those incentives that builders give, and that you're using those and you're making your sales cash equivalent as they should be, adjusting them as necessary to make them cash equivalent. So I talked about this before. Fannie Mae has some very specific guidelines on appraising in new or recently converted condo subdivisions PUDs. And basically, it's to protect them from having values that are controlled by builders. So their recommendation is that you use one sale inside the new subdivision, one sale outside, and then a third sale from inside or outside. The idea is to break that control that a builder might have. The builder may be creating their own market. So now that could be rectified by a resale. That may help to rectify that also. So you could have a new construction in the market outside and then a resale too. So that helps to make sure that the other thing is that I always recommend, if you're in a fairly new subdivision part or condo development, that you put the name of the builder in your grid, so that our clients can see that you're utilizing different builders and that there is some kind of break, and that the builder is not controlling that market. Also, make sure to do this, you're probably going to have to go outside of MLS. So again, make sure that your data sources are extending beyond the MLS, because they don't always have the information. The adjustments. Make sure that obviously all your adjustments have to be market driven. And again, I said, all the appraisals you're doing have to be kind of value in exchange. You're doing the sales comparison approach. So make sure that your adjustments are market driven. It's very tempting to make adjustments based on, for example, upgrades. The builder is putting this upgrade on, or did put this upgrade on a comparable sale, but it has to be what the market bore for that upgrade. It's not a dollar for dollar cost of that upgrade. It's how the sale price of that comparable sale reflected that upgrade. In other words, it must be market driven. As I said, understand concessions, understand their incentives out there on new construction. Make sure, this is probably one of my pet peeves, make sure that your price per square foot adjustments really are meaningful. And I will say that especially on condos. And it is even more reflective. It is very annoying to see a new construction property that's a $700,000-$800,000 new construction property. You've got some decent comparable sales, and someone's adjusting the price per square foot at $15 a square foot. People tend to buy new construction on a price per square foot basis. So make it meaningful and make it really kind of reflective of what the market is doing. Recognize, as I said, the cost does not equal value and that there may be a value impact of new. So make sure if you're using dated or different age sales that you're making an adjustment for age, and that's chronological age, not necessarily condition. So age is meaningful. Also look at that at any given time, especially in the last 20 years, there have been a lot of changes to building codes and a lot of improvements made in new construction. And so any of your chronological age adjustments should really reflect that some of those older properties may not have been built to the same code as new construction. So also realize that the bottom one there is that your adjustments for new construction appraisals may not look like existing home appraisals. Some of your adjustments may be different. So don't use the same criteria that you use or the same set of data for adjustments, whether you're using match pairs or you're using regression analysis. Make sure that you have a unique set of data for new construction, because the adjustments are different. So that's kind of our bit right now on new construction, real kind of whistle-stop tour through that. So the next half an hour, I just want to make an introduction to green building and talk a little about green homes and green buildings and some of the things that I see as important and interesting too. And I think this is a fascinating area, and I think that we can really kind of do some really important work in this area. So what is green building? So I got this definition from the EPA, and it is what they say is the practice of creating structures and using processes that are environmentally responsible and resource efficient throughout a building's life cycle, from siting to design, construction, operation, maintenance, renovation, and deconstruction. And there I highlighted that area throughout a building's life cycle, because that is a very important concept in green building, that it starts right at the beginning when we pick a site and we decide what we're going to do with that site and what property we're going to put on that site, the same as I talked of in new construction. And then green building goes right the way through to even remodeling of a property, maintenance of that property. So we're going to talk a little about sustainability, but what we're talking about is being really conscious environmentally from start all the way through to finish in that life cycle of that building. So remember that when we come back to it. So sustainability is kind of a catchphrase that we hear all the time. I think it's kind of one of those 21st century words that we talk, but I think it's good to have a look at this definition. And basically, it's a process of meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So sustainability seeks that balance between present use and the future. So basically, it's being conscious of what we're doing, and in our case, building new homes, being conscious right now of what we're doing and how that impacts future generations, whether that is in the way that we develop a site, to what we put into the property as being energy efficient, what water resources we use, what kind of sustainable materials we use that will prevent having to use up more materials in the future. So it's being conscious of the future right now. That exactly is what sustainability is. So there are 8 principles of sustainability and sustainable development that are discussed really, and these are they're important. So environmental responsiveness, sorry, I can't talk. Respecting and using that which is already at a location or which belongs there. In other words, proper siting, capitalizing on that natural feature. So that is not using energy to cut down trees if, there are trees already there and we could position a building to utilize what exists there already. As one example. Being resource efficient. So, in other words, doing more with less, using fewer resources to accomplish the same goals. And this can impact the site, land use, what materials we use to build a property, waste reduction, water conservation. And we're going to talk a lot about water conservation and energy efficiency. In other words, are we being maximally efficient with the resources that we're using to build this home? Community and cultural sensitivity. In other words, are we being appropriate in building properties to the right scale and function, and making sure that we are sensitive to what is in the market and sensitive to our community. Integrating ecology and real estate. In other words, reinforcing those connections that we have between people, place, and nature to ensure that we maximize everybody's benefit of what is there. Big part of sustainable development, major kind of component is this whole idea of whole systems, which is single solutions for multiple problems. In other words, we are building shelter, but we are also making sure that we are being successful in our energy use. It looks good aesthetically, indoor light, and the indoor environment and quality is there, and it's affordable. So that whole system, one single solution to create several different things. Another big component part of that sustainable development is what they call front-loading design. In other words, we are doing everything right up front to make sure that we've got success in the future. So rigorous comprehensive planning and design early in the project that involves all the stakeholders so that we are creating an upfront solution to something in the future. End-use lease cost. What are we trying to do and what is the cheapest way to do it? And teamwork is part of that sustainable principle of sustainable development. So what are the benefits of green building or building green? And there are several benefits that are discussed. The first one, obviously, is the use of fewer materials in all phases of construction and occupation, so including maintenance in the future. So that benefits the owner, obviously, the builder, society, and the environment. So using less to create more. Obviously, that use of less energy during the life of the building, the use of less water during the life of the building. We're going to talk about that. The use of less resources in the production of materials, and we're going to talk about that some, and improved indoor and outdoor air quality. We'll get into some of that. And I put a little note there, but of importance to appraisers is how do these benefits relate to market value? That's the big question, right? We can see that it's benefiting the environment. How does it impact value? So just an interesting article. We have this kind of general concept that building green costs more, and really it does. But surprisingly enough, it is not as much as most people think, and it's not terribly or a lot more. So according to the McGraw-Hill Construction Smart Market Report, builders and developers of single properties whose work includes more than 30% green projects. Now, it's important to understand this is a survey based on people who are building a lot of green projects. So they might have some kind of numbers that make it kind of more affordable for them to do it because they're building a lot of them. But they see the additional average cost at 5.7%. So that isn't a whole bunch more. That isn't a whole bunch more than a traditional, what we call code homes. And a code home, you're going to hear me say this for the next 20 minutes. It's something that's built to the basic local building code. And so really, when somebody is building these on a larger scale, at least 30% of their work is green projects, the additional cost is 5.7%. So let's get into the actual elements of green building. We're going to go into each one of these in some detail. So the following elements are really what divide a green building from a code-compliant building. And there really are 6 elements. And a code home may have some of these elements, but not all of them. In fact, the homes you live in might have some of them. But for a house to actually meet that definition of a green home, it has to have each 6 of these elements. And the first is site, second is water, third energy, fourth indoor air quality, fifth materials, and sixth maintenance. So we're going to go through these so that you can see why these are integral to making a home green. So the first element is site planning and development. We talked about this a little before, but incredibly important that there have to be some certain goals in green building as far as the site. So 2 primary goals, the protecting or restoring of habitat. So in green construction, we protect and restore what's already there. So if we have to cut down trees, those trees have to be regrown. Or we're going to build according to where the trees are or the stream or whatever it is. So it's protecting, restoring the habitat. And the second goal is maximizing open space for societal environmental benefit. What we do with our site is important in building a green home. And whether it is the location of the improvement, access to solar energy, if we're putting solar panels on a property, vice versa, shading to minimize the energy use from cooling the property, landscaping, even wind patterns if we're going to use some kind of wind energy on the property. So element 1 is that site planning. Element 2 is water. I find this incredibly interesting. It's something that I really didn't see until I started researching green homes and understanding them more. Nearly all water, I think it's over 92%, in the U.S. is portable or fit for human consumption. And what this essentially means is that every bit of water that you use in your home has to be collected, purified, pumped, and transported. There is an incredible use of energy in just bringing clean water to homes for use. So in green homes, we are looking to conserve water. And that doesn't mean that you only take a shower once a week, because most of you don't want to do that. It means that we use systems in green homes that minimize the use of water, and that we are minimizing energy use in our water systems. So there are many kinds of ways that we can do that. It can be shower heads, toilets, distribution, outdoor watering systems, which is actually an incredible thing, because going out with a hose to water your garden is really not a good way of conserving water. But also stormwater systems and wastewater disposal. All these systems can reduce the amount of water use in a home, conserve water, and make sure that less energy is used to produce that water. So element 3 is energy efficiency. And I think this is the one that we always think about when we think about a green home. We think, oh, it's energy efficient. It might have solar panels, or it's got a high efficiency furnace, or it's got a dishwasher that has a star on it, or something like that. But actually, as I said, with those elements, there are other parts of it. But an interesting statistic is that buildings, and I mean commercial and residential, buildings in the United States account for 40% of the energy consumed in the U.S. And half of that is residential. So 20% of the energy consumed in this country is in our homes. And there are very interesting and good ways of being able to conserve energy, and those are used in building green homes. So the first part is where they talk about what's called envelope design. Envelope design and construction. And envelopes refer to everything that separates a building's interior from its exterior. So building walls, windows, doors, roofs. So having energy efficiency in that building of the envelope. Then we have heating and cooling systems, water heating systems, appliances, electronics. All those things can help with energy efficiency. So right here we have a diagram. There's a thing called the House Energy Rating System, HERS, and I kind of show a diagram of it. I hope everybody can see it. The HERS index is a measurement of the home's energy efficiency. So this index considers all the building components and provides a rating on a scale of 0 to 100. So if you are at a 0 or close to it, you have a highly efficient home. And there is such a thing as a 0 in an energy home. There is the potential for that. I think my house is probably up there somewhere around 130, which isn't a very good thing. It's an old house. But the idea in building green homes is to get down to that green level where we are not consuming very much energy on this index. And this next diagram here shows a breakdown of household energy use. So you can see where most of it's going. It's going in heating and cooling. So, and it shows and then water heating is the next one that really takes up a lot of energy. So heating and cooling. So I think just the fact that if you have a shaded house and you have high efficiency furnace, that can contribute obviously to your energy use and probably to your utility bills. So element 4 is indoor air quality. Again, I'm not sure that we kind of think about this very much. The part of the greenness of a home has to do with indoor air quality. And so indoor air quality comprises of off-gassing, combustion-based appliances, and moisture. When we talk about off-gassing, we're talking about materials that produce some kind of gas. So particle board, paint can, carpet, fibers, vinyl flooring, and of course the combustion-based appliances that can have an impact on air quality, actually to the point of being very harmful, where carbon monoxide is leaked. Would be kind of gas ranges, water heating systems, chimneys, wood burning stoves. And another part of this indoor air quality is moisture. I'm sure that everybody here has appraised homes that are, whether there has been mold or moisture issues, and that can be very detrimental to the health of the inhabitants. So all this indoor air quality, assists with the health of people who are living in these properties. So the other thing is materials. So, key questions when you're determining the greenness of a particular material being used. And so several things, what is the material made of? How is it manufactured? Where does that material originate? And will that material improve indoor air quality? So, we talked about those fibers or, the vinyl flooring. What is the durability? So we see a lot of commercial buildings being built with concrete floors because of durability. They're not going to have to be replaced. So, when something's replaced, we've got to somehow do something with it. And does it end up in a landfill? So the idea of durable materials and reducing resource consumption, for example, using recycled materials. So element 6, the final element here, is operations and maintenance. It's not good enough just to build a green home. That home has to succeed in the future. It has to be, you have to be able to operate it, and maintenance has to be kind of used. And, there are kind of, for us as consumers and living in our homes, is a very good way of seeing, how efficient we are. We can look at our utility bill and see what kind of cost savings we have. There are actually certifications from LEED, which is the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. I'll talk about them a little bit more on how on measuring the success of energy efficient items in the operation, improvement and maintenance of a building. But this is very important. That component part has to be there in order to make the property or state that the property is actually green. So I want to just go over a few of these kind of green building certification programs, because we do talk about them and you hear the buzzwords, you hear LEED, you hear, kind of stars and whatever out there. So, but they do provide a kind of basis for measuring energy efficiency and the level of sustainability in a building. And they provide some kind of documentation covering design, construction materials, things like appliances and that kind of thing. And of course, anything that has some kind of certification or standard has value. So for us as appraisers, I think that, these programs kind of have value in the marketplace. So they're important to kind of understand or know. Usually they're kind of some point-based system, and, gold, platinum, 4-star, that kind of thing. So the first one I'm sure that you're all familiar with is the Energy Star system, which is available for both residential and commercial buildings. It is operated by the U.S. Department of Energy, the DOE, and the EPA. So there is an overall Energy Star component or for residential buildings, and they also have a focus on indoor air quality with their Air Plus system, and then on water conservation with the Water Sense system. So the little things are there. And if you go on to the EPA website, you will find a lot of information on these systems. So a home that is certified Energy Star must have at least 15% more energy efficiency than a local built home. And I remember that local code home is a house just built to code. So that may vary. Some local jurisdictions in their building codes have a lot of energy efficient items built into their building codes, and some have less. So that Energy Star system varies depending upon the region that you're in. So what meets the test in California may be different from Ohio. So Energy Star tests and certifies the following features. Obviously, your heating system. So for an Energy Star system, it has to be at least a 92% plus efficiency. They test the duct system to make sure that it's tightly sealed and tested. Insulation to make sure they're upgraded. Again, it has to be 15% above the code requirement. So upgraded R level. Water, make sure that water heaters are high efficiency. Dishwashers, go back to that water conservation. The majority of lighting, in other words, more than 50% is fluorescent, and the windows are high efficiency. So all those areas are tested in that Energy Star system. As I kind of alluded to earlier, there is such a thing as a zero energy building. Basically, the definition is that a zero energy building provides enough renewable energy to meet its own annual energy consumption requirements. So it's I guess automated. It has renewable energy. So there is an energy ready home, and this is in the I put a website on there on energy.gov. And you can go ahead and see what is necessary to build that zero energy building or house. So the other certification comes from the U.S. Green Building Council, and it's the LEED certification. A lot of people have heard of that LEED certification, and usually for commercial buildings since 2000. So what does LEED look at? They look at sustainable sites, water efficiency, again, energy and atmosphere, materials and resources, indoor environmental quality, and they look at innovation in operation. And the thing I didn't know until I did the research on this, so they have that certification, it's kind of silver, gold, platinum, but they actually use the Energy Star performance standards. So there is kind of a combination between these, and I think that's kind of an interesting thing that they do look at those performance standards from Energy Star. And I would recommend that anybody who has any interest in this looks at it. So Whistle Stop 2 through new construction and a quick introduction to green homes. I go back to what I said earlier on. Trunion is very interested in sponsoring a symposium on new construction and green homes, in particular the construction of new homes. I think some of our credit union clients out there are working with builders who are building these type of homes. I know that appraisers, I think just from the amount of people we had signed up for this webinar are interested in this and knowing how to appraise these type of homes. I would, I imagine when we get into new construction, appraising of particular green homes, you are looking for similar types of properties with the same kind of looking at all elements and certifications to ensure that we have compatibility there. I think this is a fascinating subject, and I would like to really kind of take it on the road and be able to meet with some appraisers, builders, realtors, some of our clients, and put a symposium together. So I welcome any phone calls or emails on this. I did get some from our webinar on Tuesday, and actually got a very interesting gentleman who had some really major certifications in this who was interested in presenting too. So I think that this is a good thing to have. I thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I know you're busy. I thank you for your business. I thank all the appraisers out there for the incredible hard work they're doing. I know that you guys are a little busy, so to taking an hour out of your time, I really appreciate it. And thank you to all our credit union clients for the business that you give us. And enjoy the day out there.